Bando, Stone and the New World is the latest album from Childish Gambino. We have actually only heard from him just a few-ish months ago when he re-released his 2020 album that had no title, no track names, no album artwork, just nothing, that he just released onto the world. He threatened us with it because it was just really not good. Oh, God. And he's decided to repackage it and attempt to make amends for what he initially released, although I listened to Ata Vista and I'm not going to lie, very little sounded any different to me. It still sounded as bad as it first did when it came out, but he still is back here with a new album, even though that was only recently, and he's kind of going a bit mad with the sounds on this album. He's not really committing to one sound. He's not really committing to just being a rapper that we once knew. He is very much showing off his versatility on this album. Now be careful what you wish for when you mention versatility with music, because that does get thrown around quite a bit, and artists get labelled as versatile because they can do more than one sound, and maybe an album is, you know, scattered with multiple different styles and ambitious genre blends perhaps, but it doesn't necessarily always mean that the end product will be great. And I think this album right here is probably one of the best examples, or best recent examples you could point to and go, yeah, look, they tried lots of things. Did all of it stick? No. Did some of it sound pretty bad? Yeah. And did some of it sound actually decent? Also, yeah, but the end overall result just becomes a little too far-fetched. And while I appreciate that Childish Gambino does have an interesting vision, he is very artistic and he is very versatile in his own career. He acts, he writes, he is a stand-up comedian, he raps, he makes music, he sings. He did the whole Soul album back in 2016, which was really good and probably still his best work to date. Like, the guy isn't just gonna pigeonhole himself or paint himself into a corner with one particular style or vision. And I appreciate that he is an artist that is willing to do that, but I just don't know if he's always got the chops for it. I think sometimes on this album it kind of highlights that he really shouldn't be trying all this stuff because it just comes out a little awkward. The opening track is a really good example of that, where he's just kind of like doing this braggadocious I'm the shit type thing with all the lyrics. That's just a little awkward to listen to because the way he's kind of like delivering his voice doesn't sound very believable. It just sounds a little goofy to me. But also the instrumental, which is like this ragga blend with like electronic music, it just all sounds a bit messy. And I just think it's one of those things where it's like, if another artist that maybe approached it with a bit more of a careful, you know, softer touch, it might have worked, but it just sounds so heavy-handed. It just sounds so forced when he's doing it here, and it just really makes for an awkward intro to the album. And it like doesn't even set up the album in any particular way. Like, the tone shift from this track into the next few songs just doesn't make sense at all, and it's just making me kind of go like, what is going on? I mean, I think even the hardcoreist lovers of Childish Gambino and lovers of this album would be willing to admit that, yeah, this opening track, it doesn't set up anything whatsoever and just really feels awkward. When you then come into like Lithonia and the track Survive as well, which are much sweeter, softer tracks, particularly Survive actually. I think this is one of the best tracks on the whole album. It just feels really smooth, it's really nice, it's carefree, it's got a lovely vibe to it. I think it works quite well. Lithonia for me doesn't work as well, although I kind of want to like this song just because it feels so overwrought and melodramatic and big and larger than life. Like, I can appreciate what he's trying to go for, but I just again feel like it doesn't work. I feel like there's a mismatch with how he's singing and his delivery and the lines that like kind of sound a bit off key sometimes, and then sometimes they sound on key. I can't really figure it out. I just feel like there's a mismatch somewhere between what's going on instrumentally and his voice and the vibe that the song's trying to conjure up. It sounds like he's trying to shoot for something that's like ready-made for a stadium, and yet Maybe it would be. I don't know. Maybe if I saw this live, this would work or something. I don't know. Just something seems like it's a bit off with this song. I may end up repeating myself and saying that about so many tracks on this album, though. But yeah, I'll try not to do that unintentionally. Although it may end up just seeping out of me anyway, because it just kind of is the blueprint for what we have here. Just mismatch of ideas that don't quite work. But yeah, Talk My Shit has Amore, Flo Milli on it. He kind of gets overshadowed by both of them, which some people might find funny, but the idea that, two female artists can't do that on a track with a male rapper seems a bit unfair. But the actual truth is that I've never really thought Flo Milli was that great of a rapper anyway, so I think it's more to do with that than anything else. But yeah, Childish Gambino, man, just kind of sounds goofy on this track. And you know what I'm going to say here, and he's probably not going to like this, but this reminds me a lot of the more recent Drake stuff, where he's just piling on all the, kind of like flavor of the month features, flavor of the month new kids on the block, to kind of boost his streaming numbers just because they'll get hype. Just like, that track with Yeet on the last Drake album, where it's like, okay, fair enough, you quite clearly put Yeet on this because you knew it would blow up, and it did, because Yeet is doing crazy numbers at the moment. And this track kind of reminds me of that, where he's just kind of throwing on a bunch of like hot new artists and ends up not really finding a way to make it fit, and just has them there for the sake of having them there, and ends up just sounding like you're the one out of place when the entire track could have just been them two doing it themselves. I know, I understand the irony of mentioning Drake on this very album review, but it does feel that way to me. I mean, actually, there is a point on the track where he does sound a bit like Drake, and he might be imitating him because he might be just taking the piss a little bit. Could be a valid point of view to have, because of then what happens later in the album. I mean, I'm already on the topic now. I can't just stop there. I may as well mention the track Yoshinoya. I do this all the time. I write things down, hope I can pronounce it right, and then probably get it wrong. But you know which track I mean. This is an interesting track, because we are seeing now, this year particularly, a lot of people coming for Drake. And in case you didn't know that, I might be the first to tell you that there was a whole rap beef this year. I'm sure you haven't heard about it, but there really was. Like, you can believe me, guys, trust me, there was a big rap beef this year, and it involved Drake himself and people coming for Drake. Yes, that happened, and Childish Gambino is getting in on it now himself. Now, this is something I didn't know, because apparently Drake dissed Childish Gambino while on stage and said something about how This Is America was terrible and Childish Gambino's tour was bad and this, that and the other, which is kind of wild. I didn't know anything about that, or if I did, I forgot about it, and it just, went to the back of my mind. But it seems as though Childish Gambino is not willing to let that go. And I think maybe even on Meltdown there was a reference to Gambino as well from Drake. Drake is just always out here sneak dissing, man. Like, it's so corny. It's so corny. Like, there's no wonder that so many people came for him in this rap beef this year, because he's just such a petty person. Like, you can see it oozes off of him. And I know it's probably wrong for a music reviewer to like brand a personality of somebody in this kind of way without really actually knowing them. But like, it's just so like, it's, remember when he like name dropped Esperanza Spalding of all people on a track? Like, I can't help but feel that Drake is just this kind of person that everybody labels him to be. Like, he just seems the kind of guy. And coming for Gambino just seems so lame as well. Like, he's not somebody that's going to enter a rap beef anytime soon. Like, why come for him? It's just lame. It's just lame. Anyway, Gambino gets his word in, though. I don't know if it's going to require a response from Drake, but it's actually pretty heated and pointed the way he comes for him, because he says about him being nearly 50 and dressing like he's, like 20 or whatever, which I think is something people have said about him before, the way he dress. Captions, Instagram captions, he points at that. The cosplay, the kind of like wearing hip hop you know, as a costume whenever you want it to suit you, that kind of thing. It's stuff that we have absolutely heard this year alone many times and many years prior to this. But interesting that Gambino is going right for him here. And he sounds pretty hungry on this track. I think the beat switch was a little awkward, but it kind of works for what he's going for. Beyond that, though, we do get a lot of more kind of like directionless genre blending on the album, where you've got to Be, which is just like, what in the JPEG Mafia is this? Like, it just sounds so messy to me, and I'm not always the biggest fan of JPEG Mafia, but I feel like a lot of his kind of like experimental sounds and samples and the way he constructs beats is always at least appreciated. Like, I can appreciate it. I can at least look at it and go, you know what, this beat is actually really good, even if I think sometimes his delivery isn't the best or his lyrics kind of get really stale for me. I can always at least look at something he's produced and go, man, like, his vision is beyond next level. And yet this track just kind of highlights how when you take that artistic approach away, you're just left with a messy slop of a song that has a Prodigy sample in it, and it just sounds so awkward as hell to me. This is really bad, honestly. It's so bad. Real Love, I think, is a track where he's attempting to kind of go a bit more of a like a synth pop direction. It does remind me of something maybe The Weeknd would do, but I think I've already mentioned with Gambino's vocals on this album, he sometimes sounds a little off. He sometimes isn't really singing in the best way he probably could. And this song just does sound way more suited for Abel to sing over it, or maybe even somebody like a Steve Lacy. Like, I just don't think Gambino is the best singer, and I think we probably have known that throughout the years and maybe let it slide. And not that you need to be a technically amazing singer to make all your songs work, but sometimes if it does sound a little awkward or out of place, it just really sticks out. And I think this song does stick out for that kind of bad reason. Because look, I've reviewed people on this channel before that I've praised highly, and they don't necessarily have the most technically proficient on-key vocal delivery on every word, every line. Glaive would be a good example. I thought his album from last year was fantastic, and he doesn't have the best voice and uses auto-tune in places as well. But you can make it work. You can sell it in a way that kind of hides maybe you're not so good at singing. Gambino kind of just lets it out front and center on tracks like Lithonia and tracks like Real Love, and it just kind of sounds a bit awkward. I keep using the word awkward, but we have to go one step further and just say it sounds terrible on Can You Feel Me with the feature Legend. And wow, this is like, oh, this scratches your ears. The combination of these two singers, I have no idea what's going on here, but good God, this did not work for me at all. The instrumentation sounds like it's ready-made for like a Disney movie, and it just sounds so like cheesy. It sounds like something Jaden Smith would do. Childish Gambino dropping Jaden Smith songs now, like what is going on? Running Around sounds like Good Charlotte's the anthem. Like, there's a weird punk twist to this song I just find so out of nowhere. But there are some other moments on this album where he does kind of like throw in these extra additional instruments that adds a bit more depth to the tracks, and it ends up sounding a little bit more like a pop punk song than anything else. And this track just really stands out in that kind of weird way once again for me. I just find a lot of his ideas not really landing, as you can probably tell with the way this review is going. Like, sometimes it works, and sometimes it's alright, and sometimes he does sound good at just singing, like on Survive, and even the closing track, which I thought was pretty nice as well. But then other times, he just kind of like ditches all of that, and the tastefulness just disappears, and you just get this weird blend of stuff. Kruangbin hijacks a whole song near the end of the album too. I really don't vibe with what they try and do. Their most recent album to me was just washed over nothingness. Like, oh, I couldn't stand it at all. It just sounded so like, let's get the beers out and let's go to a festival and let's just play this while you're high, which maybe is the right environment to listen to it, but when you're not in that environment, Kruangbin like really sound awful to me. I just don't vibe with it whatsoever. And just being like tacked on this album in the way it was, like, what is the point of this being here? I don't know. And that highlights a lot of the bulk really of a lot of the issues on this album. Childish Gambino is trying too hard to be experimental while also simultaneously being vibey and being chilled out and being like cool and just like, you know, offering some chill tracks. Like, it feels like two albums just mashed together, and there's no rhyme or reason to any of the sequencing, any of the ideas kind of like locking in to meld into this really well thought out track to track album. Like, you can pick and choose tracks from this album and maybe just make mini EPs, because that's kind of how it ends up feeling. It feels more like a playlist of ideas rather than a through line idea for one album. And look, I will repeat myself because I know there'll be somebody in the comments that will maybe say something like, but not all albums need to be like the whole way through, they need to sound the same, they need to have this vision the whole way through. I know they don't. I like Genesis Owusu, I really do. He's a great artist, and his album from 2021 was all over the place, and there's loads of other albums I can point to as well as being all over the place with our ideas, but they work because the artist has at least a vision and it fits and it makes sense. I just think Gambino loses sight of what he's trying to go for somewhere on this album, and you just go from track to track with all these mishmash of ideas, and it just ultimately doesn't work. It just ultimately doesn't work, and that's just where I'm at with this album. I don't want to go overly harsh because I at least appreciate an artist trying something new. I always say that on this channel, and I like when artists don't pigeonhole themselves, as I've used that word already, into just one thing. But when it doesn't work, I have to be honest and say that I personally don't like this, and it doesn't work for my ears, and it just doesn't fit as a whole album, and there's just a few too many problems going through this album. That's really the bulk of it here. Because like I say, there are some cool ideas, but it doesn't execute the best at all times. On top of that too, will I be returning to any of the tracks that I did mildly praise throughout this review? Not really. That's the other thing as well. Like, yes, there are some good moments, but I can't see myself going back to anything from this album in like 2 or 3 months. Hell, 2 or 3 days, if we're being honest. So I've got to be honest, and I think it's once again another miss from Gambino. 4.5 out of 10. Yeah, just, I've given so many negative reviews and negative scores to him throughout the years, and this is once again another one of those, I'm afraid. It's mad because I actually really do like him, and I think Donald Glover as an actor and Donald Glover as an artist is fantastic, but yeah, I just have never found myself really gravitating towards any of his albums apart from Awaken My Love. So this feels sad to say, but I have to be honest and just think this album is just all over the place, a bit of a mess, and doesn't land for me. Let me know your thoughts though. I'm interested to see if somebody loves this. What are their reasons? Like, what is it about it that you love about this album? Is all the things I said don't work the reason it works for you? Because that could be true. Let me know in the comments what you think. Make sure you subscribe as well. Check out my Patreon if you are interested in supporting me over on there, although you probably won't after this review. I can totally understand that, but at least leave a like, subscribe for more videos in the future. Have a good day and goodbye.